The folder lay open on the table, papers spread like scattered bones of an old secret. She read each line, each faded signature, her lips pressing tighter with every revelation. These weren't just records, they were blueprints of the Empire's corruption. The reporter leaned back, exhaustion etched deep into his face. "We can't rush this. If we reveal too soon, they'll bury it before it breathes." Her hands tightened on the papers. "If we wait too long, they'll bury us." That night, she barely slept. Her mind spun, replaying every humiliation, every strike they had dealt. The smear campaigns, the lawsuits, the fire. She had felt powerless then. But now, staring at the evidence in her hands, she felt something new crawl back into her chest: control. By morning, she had a plan, not reckless shouting into cameras this time. Not another stunt they could spin as hysteria. This time, she would move like them, quiet, strategic, precise. She called the few allies who hadn't vanished, a lawyer still willing to fight, a student hacker who had once idolized her broadcast, the bread seller's nephew who knew the streets better than maps. Unlikely pieces, but pieces all the same. Around a rickety kitchen table, they formed a circle. No titles, no leaders, just believers. She spread the documents across the wood and said, "We can't win by shouting louder. We win by being smarter." They listened, eyes wide, some skeptical, some burning with fire. The hacker tapped the table nervously. "If we leak everything at once, the families will choke us before the people even read it." She nodded. "Exactly. So, we don't give them everything at once. We give them drops, poison in their water, slow and steady. One piece at a time, until they can't breathe without confessing." The reporter frowned. "And when they strike back," she met his gaze, "then the world will already know where the smoke is coming from. They can't put out a fire everyone can see." For hours they mapped it out. Timelines, safe houses, contacts who could be trusted. Each detail was fragile, each step risky. But as the plane grew, so did their resolve. The kitchen, once heavy with despair, now buzzed with something else: defiance. Still, shadows lingered. The families weren't blind, they had eyes everywhere. A single slip could end everything. That night, as the group dispersed, the lawyer pulled her aside. "You know they'll come for you harder than before. Once you start this, there's no turning back." She exhaled slowly, staring at the city skyline through the cracked window. "They already came for me, but they forgot something." "What's that?" She turned, eyes steady, voice sharp as a blade. "I'm still standing." And for the first time since the wedding veil was lifted, she wasn't just reacting. She was planning. She was moving. The hunted was learning how to hunt. They chose midnight, not for drama, but because the night swallows noise and hides movement. They moved quietly, voices low, like people who know the value of silence. The hacker thumbed at keys, hands steady despite the tremor in everyone else's chest. The file was small, a single thread in a web of corruption, but it was precise, a transactional ledger showing a thin paper trail of bribes linked to one of the family's oldest shell companies. Enough to spark questions, not everything, but enough to make people look. The reporter uploaded the file to a secure channel, then to public forums, then to social feeds. They watched together, breathing shallow, waiting to see if the machinery would catch. The first clicks felt like drops of a storm about to fall. At 0:13, the first journalist posted it with a short headline: "Proof of bribery in city contracts." The notification pinged like a bell. The initial trickle of reads jumped, then surged. The ledger's numbers were ugly and specific, the signatures unmistakable. Within an hour, the city's investigative pages picked it up. The story spread from niche forums to mainstream feeds, then into group chats and newsrooms. People shared it not because it was loud, but because it made sense in a way their anger finally recognized. For the families, the first reaction was disbelief, shock packaged in panic meetings behind closed doors. Calls were made in hushed tones. Lawyers, advisors, and PR teams assembled like soldiers preparing an offensive. The ledger had pierced their armor, her phone lit up with messages, applause, disbelief, and thinly veiled threats. The black car returned that very morning, its silhouette a reminder that the watchers were still watching. But this time the watchers had been seen, and that changed something in the air. The reporter came to her with a quiet grin and tired eyes. "They'll try to dismiss it as fake," he warned. "So, we need a chain, witnesses, corroboration." She nodded. Corroboration meant risk, but it also meant the ledger could be anchored in truth. They called the retired clerk who had kept copies. He agreed to meet in a small cafe in the afternoon, hands trembling, voice coarse with age. He confirmed the entries, his memory painting details the paper couldn't show, dates, names, whispered meetings. His testimony was fragile and priceless. By evening, a watchdog outlet had premiered an expose built around the ledger and the clerk's quiet recollection. The narrative shifted from rumor to scandal. People who once shrugged now leaned forward, questions multiplied. Officials promised inquiries they might never finish. The first cracks appeared in public statements. A reluctant spokesperson said the company was reviewing internal procedures. It was language that tried to soothe while admitting nothing. But the soot of guilt was visible in the hesitation, and people smelled it. The streets reacted. Protests that afternoon were small at first, a handful of young people at a corner near the family's headquarters. By night they swelled, voices joined by workers who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Their chants were simple and furious. Inside the family's mansions, panic had a different flavor. Sharp, cold calculus. The lawyer proposed attacks, lawsuits, denials, counter-leaks questioning the ledger's authenticity. The PR team went to work, painting the whistleblowers as conspirators, trying to shift the narrative with polished fury. Retaliation arrived in layers. A coordinated smear piece surfaced the next morning, full of insinuations about the reporter's integrity and the hacker's past. Emails were dredged from old accounts and recirculated, rumors planted like seeds in fertile soil. The goal was not to prove innocence, it was to drown truth in noise. The former employee who had given the first testimony received a visit at dawn, polite, insistent, terrifying. He came to her later, that day, with a hollow look and 2 words: "They threatened." He left the country the next week. Fear had teeth, and it bit deep. But new witnesses emerged, 2 quiet people who had been hit by the family steals and were suddenly ready to talk. A supplier leaked an invoice, a city clerk remembered an odd meeting. Each small piece stacked the ledger into a dam that couldn't be ignored. The drip turned into pressure. Financial regulators issued a preliminary statement, procedural, careful, but public. The family's stock dipped on whispers alone. Markets reacted to the scent of uncertainty. Power trembled when money flinched. For the first time, the empire felt human and fragile. Her nights were no longer for hiding. She sat with the team, charting responses, preparing for every angle. They double-checked sources, reinforced backups, and reached out to legal allies. Strategy became survival. Survival became moral duty. The first drop had to be defended. Then, in a move meant to terrify, a private investigator showed her a photo. The clerk's house, windows smashed, documents soaked in rain. The image was meant to signal, stop, but it had the opposite effect. Anger replaced fear, and where fear had narrowed her, anger widened clarity. The city buzzed with argument and division. Some rallied for her cause. Others recoiled at the chaos, frightened by what change might mean. The ledger had split people open. Those who benefited from the old order bristled, while the rest began to ask dangerous questions about what they'd accepted. That night, when she stepped onto the balcony, she saw faces in small clusters across the neighborhood, people reading updates on their phones, talking in low voices. The ledger had done what fear could not. It had made strangers look at each other and see the possibility of something different. But power didn't relent. The families crafted their public counter and aggressive lawsuit, a whisper campaign painting the clerk as an unreliable witness, a sudden claim that the leaked files were falsified. The drumbeat of retaliation intensified. The first drop had splashed, and now the ripple demanded a tidal answer. She knew the moment had changed the game. They had forced the first fisher small, precise, human. Now everything would speed up. Reprisals, revelations, choices. The ledger had been the spark. The wildfire that followed would test every ally, every nerve, and every promise. And in that charged silence before dawn, she understood the truth of what they'd done. A single, careful exposure could topple an unearned throne, but it would not fall quietly. It would fight back with claws, teeth, and money. The first drop had landed. The storm was coming. The retaliation came like thunder. Swift, merciless, predictable. At dawn, police stormed the hacker's apartment, seizing computers and dragging him away in cuffs. The footage was leaked instantly, edited to look like a criminal's capture, not a whistleblower's punishment. The message was clear. No one was untouchable. By noon, the reporter received a summons. Defamation, incitement, conspiracy. The charges piled up like bricks. His papers suspended him, claiming neutrality, though the truth was cowardice. His voice, once amplified through headlines, was muted under official stamps. She knew her turn was next. The families wouldn't let her walk free after igniting this storm. Still, she refused to run. If I vanish, she told her allies, my silence will be louder than their lies. The clerk, the old man who had risked everything, was found dead 2 days later. They called it a heart attack, but everyone who knew the weight of secrets understood better. Fear crept into her team's bones, chilling them from the inside. Some begged her to stop, to disappear before she shared his fate. But stopping now meant his death, their sacrifices, every bruise and smear, all for nothing. She couldn't accept that. She wouldn't. So she made the boldest decision yet. She would confront the Empire head-on. She planned one last broadcast, not in secret, not hidden in shadows, but in the open. The city square, cameras rolling, her voice raw and unfiltered. If they wanted to crush her, they would have to do it in the light of day. When the day came, the square filled with faces. Some curious, some hostile, most uncertain. People carried phones, live streaming from every angle. The families sent their own men in suits, police at the edges, reporters primed with hostile questions. The air vibrated with tension. She stepped forward. No veil, no disguise. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. They told you I was a liar. They told you I wanted fame. But all I ever wanted was truth. And the truth is this: they've stolen from you, lied to you, killed in silence while you bowed your heads. No more. Gasps, murmurs, chants rising like a drumbeat. She lifted the last piece of evidence, the ledger, copies safe in too many hands now to be erased. She named names, dates, contracts. She spoke not as a victim, but as a mirror, forcing the city to see itself. The family's representatives shouted denials, waving papers, calling her unstable, dangerous, unhinged. But the crowd wasn't blind anymore. They had seen too many cracks, too many coincidences, too many accidents. Denial had lost its power. Then chaos. Police surged, pushing through the crowd, hands reaching for her arms. But the people moved, two shields of flesh and fury, strangers locking arms to block the path. Chants roared, echoing through the square. Truth, truth, truth. She was dragged down once, knees scraping the pavement, but hands pulled her back up. Faces she didn't know lifted her higher, voices carrying her words further. In that moment, she realized she wasn't speaking anymore. The crowd was. The families had wanted to make her the enemy. Instead, they had made her a symbol. Symbols are harder to kill than people. The police finally retreated, their force swallowed by sheer numbers. The families withdrew too, hiding behind walls and gates while the city surged with questions they could no longer silence. The ledger was in the world now, copied, shared, living beyond destruction. By nightfall, she sat in her small apartment, bruised and exhausted. She had not toppled the empire in a day. The families still had power, money, connections, but they no longer had absolute control. The veil had torn, and the city had seen what lay beneath. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window. She wasn't a heroine or a saint. She was a scarred woman who refused to bow, who paid dearly to speak. The cost had been heavy. The fight was far from over, but she had won one thing no one could take back. The truth lived outside her now. And that was enough, because empires don't fall in silence, they fall when one voice breaks into many. And tonight, for the first time, she knew, the echo had begun.